Could you explain it in a very simple way? What is our metabolism and why do we need to care about our metabolic health?
If you were to take a typical animal in nature that is living in harmony with nature, it's basically living as it's supposed to be. Its cells are working, it's getting the right type of nutrition, it's getting hydration, it's moving around a lot. And human beings used to be like that up until a few decades ago. We wouldn't be prone to overeating. There simply wasn't enough bad food or excess food around us. We would be moving around a lot more and our bodies were working as they should. So our metabolic health was at an equilibrium.
Now, if Jo is listening to you right now, she's thinking, where do I go next? I don't know what my metabolic health is like. Where could she go in terms of getting tested? What markers would you want her to check? Where would Jo go? She feels like there is something not quite right. She's overwhelmed, exhausted, burning out, feeling tired, getting sick, chronically fatigued. There is something going on there. What would you want to know about Jo to see where her metabolism is at?
If you want to know whether you're in good metabolic health or bad metabolic health, it is going to be a combination of markers. The first most obvious marker is your...
What do you see in terms of the impact of chronic stress and that super busy lifestyle that folks are living right now, especially in white collar or professional service profession, really demanding the big corporate culture of running around the clock and seeking that promotion and seeking that bonus? What do you see in terms of the impact of stress on the markers of metabolic health?
At a scientific level, I mean, we're talking about two very potentially devastating hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, which do serve a function. I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, we have to have a fight or flight response, otherwise we wouldn't survive. We have to know when there's a threat, and the adrenaline and cortisol shoot up and help us either get away from the threat, or the problem with modern day living is that cortisol and adrenaline levels are chronically elevated.
What are some of the most common and most catastrophic patient scenario you see on a day-to-day basis in the hospital?
I mean, the most common one would be a heart attack or a stroke, which I've seen. There may be different circumstances. There may be that executive who's in their 40s, 50s, and then has the heart attack, stroke, and maybe they don't even have bad metabolic markers. I mean, most of the time they do, but sometimes they don't, in which case, it's just purely the stress which has driven this. If things are off with your environment, what you're eating, how much you're moving, if your brain is not getting the right stimulation and you're stressed and anxious and in a hurry, your metabolic health is quickly, and I mean quickly, going to fall off a cliff.
Hi, Dr. Suneel. How are you today?
Hi, Charlene. Great to join you. I'm doing great.
I was wondering, could you let our listener know what you do and who do you do it for?
Okay, great question. Well, I am a physician. I specialize in internal medicine, which is a very broad specialty, covers a lot. Mainly when I work clinically, I work in a hospital. So we see all manner of conditions that get admitted under a general medical service, ranging from cardiac conditions, heart attacks, people with heart failure, people with really bad infection, lung conditions, kidney conditions, you name it. We will see it on the medical service. So it is acute care. So my goal when I work in the hospital is to get our patients better as quickly as possible so that we can discharge them and they can be well again. So that's one aspect of what I do professionally. But my main passion is in the field of preventive medicine and metabolic health. And there is some overlap with my hospital work, albeit not much, because I'm obviously focusing on acute problems. But when I'm producing most of my content, what I'm trying to do is bring awareness to anyone who wants to heed the message that there is nothing, absolutely nothing that is more important than their health. And I know that people are very busy nowadays. You work with a lot of very busy people. And I would like everybody out there to always be taking a step back and thinking, look, okay, I've got my career, I've got my family. And sometimes that can feel like the most important thing, but actually it's not. The most important thing is your health. If you don't have that, you're no use to your family. So I really try to emphasize this. And what I want people to do is understand that sadly, the forces around us, whether it be government healthcare like in the UK or insurance controlled healthcare like the US. Unfortunately, the system is not set up to keep us well. And there are many people who profit from sickness. And it is on us to take charge of our health. I'm sure we'll talk more about the pillars of health, but if I can sum it up, it's on each one of us to take charge of our baseline health. And there are so many things that we can be doing every single day to promote a sense of both physical and mental well-being.
I'm so glad you've said that. And I know you mentioned at the very start that you were a metabolic health expert. Now, for folks listening that are not familiar with the concept of metabolism, could you explain it in a very simple way? What is our metabolism and why do we need to care about our metabolic health?
Absolutely. Great question. Well, this doesn't get enough attention as it deserves. And ironically, I think the entire medical establishment has gone absolutely insane over the last few decades, because up until 30 or 40 years ago, doctors were thinking about this. I remember even when I was a boy growing up in my village in England, not far from London, I would go to the doctor, and it was very difficult to get a prescription from a doctor. That wasn't the mentality. The mentality was they would talk to you about lifestyle, and then only when necessary, they would give you a pill. But nowadays, everything has shifted dramatically. So to come back to your question, your metabolic health is basically how well your body is functioning at baseline, how well it's functioning at an organ level, how well it's functioning at a cellular level. Ideally, I mean, if you were to take in a typical animal in nature that is living in harmony with nature, it's basically living as it's supposed to be. Its cells are working, it's getting the right type of nutrition, it's getting hydration, it's moving around a lot. And human beings used to be like that up until a few decades ago. We wouldn't be prone to overeating. There simply wasn't enough bad food or excess food around us. We would be moving around a lot more, and our bodies were working as they should. So our metabolic health was at an equilibrium. Now, what has happened, sadly, because of what I call the toxic modern mainstream culture, people are eating terrible fake foods. People are very sedentary. And they're also, which I know is your area of interest, Charlene, that people's mental health as a result is not right, because our physical and our mental health is intrinsically tied together. So people are walking around stressed, anxious, they're walking around depressed. And a lot of this is coming down to fundamentally their metabolic health not being in a state of equilibrium. And we can talk about scientific terms like mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible to just basically say that if things are off with your environment, what you're eating, how much you're moving, and if your brain is not getting the right stimulation and you're stressed and anxious and in a hurry, your metabolic health is quickly, and I mean quickly, going to fall off a cliff.
And it's really important to talk about that in the context of the real killers, right? If we look at cancer, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular incidents, those are some of the top killers in the world. And they all boil down to having a dysregulated metabolic health. Is that correct?
Exactly. They do. So if you think about it like this, if you haven't got good metabolic health, you are likely inflamed. I think most people can picture being inflamed. They have a state of inflammation to various degrees. Lots of conditions are associated with that, primarily insulin resistance, which is the mechanism by which most people nowadays will get high blood pressure, high cholesterol, pre-diabetes, and type 2 diabetes. And the absolute tragedy is that most of the time, this can be reversed in a matter of weeks if only people were able to do so. It's easier said than done. It doesn't help when you have a medical establishment that is really not focused on it at all. I mean, it's just a joke. Doctors don't have enough time and basically are not taught to even think about this. Currently, the whole mantra is, oh, you have this issue, whether it's high cholesterol, high blood pressure, here's a pill, here's an injection, that's it. And you're not fixing the upstream problem, which is why we're seeing all the statistics that you just alluded to, with soaring rates of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, other inflammatory disorders. All of this is going up because we have such a poor metabolic health baseline. I mean, to give you a statistic, it's now estimated in the UK. I'm sad to say, every time I come back to the UK, which is fairly frequently, it seems slightly worse in terms of people's health than the last time. And I don't think it's far off the US, but in the US, only an estimated 9% of the population is estimated to be metabolically healthy. If you were to look at markers like their weight, their blood pressure, their cholesterol, their blood sugars, it's only 9%. And it was closer to 99%, maybe, or maybe 90%, 6 or 7 decades ago. I mean, it's terrible. The average sub-Saharan African now, think about this. Sub-Saharan Africa, we grew up donating money because that continent was largely starving. But the average sub-Saharan African you take at 35 or 40-year old will be much healthier than the average American or Brit. Tragedy, tragedy what's happened to our countries.
Now, if Joe is listening to you right now and she's thinking, where do I go next? I don't know what my metabolic health is like. Where could she go in terms of getting tested? What markers would you want her to check? Would she get a blood test, a stool test, a urine test? Where would Joe go? She feels like there is something not quite right. She's overwhelmed, exhausted, burning out, feeling tired, getting sick, chronically fatigued. There is something going on there. What
Yeah,
would you want to know about Jo to see where her metabolism is at?
that is an absolutely fabulous question, actually, because uh, again, everybody hears the terms metabolic health, insulin resistance. It doesn't always mean very much to the average person. And a lot of people are walking around thinking they're healthy when they're not. So really crucial that everybody who's listening considers what I'm about to say. If you want to know whether you're in good metabolic health or bad metabolic health, it is going to be a combination of markers. The first most obvious marker is your weight. Are you overweight or are you obese? Now, body mass index is the traditional way of doing this. It's not ideal, but I still think most of the time it's correct in diagnosing people as being overweight or obese. So that's simply it's a function of your weight in kilograms and height in meters squared. We come up with a number. You can plug it in online, BMI, anybody can do it, BMI calculator. So you take your weight, your height, do the calculation. Ideally, it should be between 20 to 25. Some people have a higher bone density or they're very muscular, but that's a minority of people these days. So for most people, you want it between 20 and 25. 25 to 30 is overweight, more than 30 is obese. That's one marker. I'm also a huge fan of simple body fat percentage. Track that. You can find out your body fat percentage. There are a whole load of weighing scales out there that you can get on Amazon. Not expensive, and they will attach to your device. And although again they're not 100% accurate, they will give you a good picture, and that usually they are not far off. So you will measure your body fat percentage. Typically women run about 10 points higher than men, just naturally. That women will always have a higher body fat percentage, but you can calculate yours by doing it yourself at home, and then you can plug it in online and you can see if you have excess body fat or not. That's another good marker. So these are at-home things that anybody can do. With regards to blood tests, a lot you can do. So I'll go through the main ones and then I'll tell you my favorite one. So the main ones that people are probably familiar with are a cholesterol panel, particularly looking at what your LDL, supposed called bad cholesterol, LDL, low density cholesterol is. Look at your triglycerides. Are those elevated or not? It's a whole different discussion about what the cutoffs are, but generally, people who are in poor metabolic health will have elevated blood cholesterol levels as well. Going with that, that's why so many people are now being put on medicines. So remember that triglycerides, LDL cholesterol. Then another blood test, which is really good, is a test for diabetes called HbA1c. In the UK, you use a different scale and different way of measuring it than the US. We use a percentage, whereas you use like a scale. It goes up to the 40s and then reaches a cutoff. So whatever country you're in, You want to make sure that your measurement is in line and you know what your doctor thinks of as pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. But as soon as you start to have poor metabolic health, usually your HbA1c will start to creep up into a pre-diabetic range. So that's another really good blood test you can do. Those would be the main ones. And then the other marker is your blood pressure. What are your typical blood pressure levels? I definitely recommend measuring at home, not only in the doctor's office where it can be abnormal. The final blood test, which is my favorite, not used, is a test called HOMA-IR, HOMA-IR. Made lots of videos about it. Anybody can search for them. So this test measures, it will basically help you to calculate whether you're insulin resistant, and it can be years before your HbA1c is abnormal. So what you want to get is a fasting insulin blood test and a fasting glucose at the same time. And then you can plug the numbers into a computer and it will come up with a number. You want your number to be as close to 1 as possible. As it starts getting up towards 2, 3, 4, it will start indicating significant insulin resistance. And I really think this is a fabulous test to do because it will tell you years before your HbA1c is abnormal whether you are becoming insulin resistant and inflamed.
Oh, I love it. I actually test those regularly in terms of my own health, but also when I look at my clients, because very often, as much as I would love to tell you that my clients come to me because they're well and they want to stay well, it's very much not the case, doctor. It's often because, forgive my French, but shit
Yeah.
happened. They just got a
Yeah.
diagnosis, the house is on fire, and now they've just talked to their doctor and they want to talk with a holistic healthcare practitioner to help them implement a new lifestyle and new strategies. So I often see what I call the 3D in my business is either they've just had a diagnosis or their spouse is threatening them with a divorce or they just had a death in the family. So typically that's when folks call me.
Okay. Yep. That crisis point. Yeah. And a lot of people
Crisis
have
point.
this, and that's a reality. Really good thing you hit on there. A lot of people need that wake up call, and it will come sooner or later. We do get some people who kind of have a wake up moment before that crisis hits. But
Yes.
yeah, for a lot of people, it's getting that shock from their doctor that they have this really abnormal blood test. They don't want to take a medication, or they have something even worse happen to them, like a heart attack or a mini stroke. And then suddenly they realize, well, we have to take better care of ourselves. We want to see our children grow up. We don't want to be sick at such a young age.
Well, that's the thing, but I'm sure you probably see the same in your practice. Very often, my clients want to run away from sickness as opposed to proactively run towards prolonged health, right? Which is a mindset shift and very much was in that position too. You know, I
Yeah.
waited until the point I got sick to be interested in wellness. I'll be very honest. I did not care
Hmm.
one bit about
Yeah.
well-being. To be honest, it was not even on my radar. You know, I was trained as a lawyer. My map of the world was study hard, work hard, make a lot of money, get a promotion, become a partner. That was my map of the world. That's
Yeah.
really what was important. And that's what I learned, you know, being a good student. That's what I learned. And then I got sick. My father got a burnout induced heart attack. And then
Oh, no.
suddenly I realized that life is not to be taken for granted. And actually, that really is the moment that made me pivot and dedicate the remainder of my career to a new cause, which is well-being and preventative care.
Yeah, which is a fantastic story that you took a low point and then transformed it into being able to help others, and that's absolutely true. That so many people, especially highly ambitious people who are in careers, have this kind of map in their head of how things are, how they're going to progress, and they aren't taking good care of their health, or something else happens, or they realize simply that they're on a hamster wheel and there's no getting out of it. You know, they're stuck. They have bills to pay, mortgage, family to take care of, and yeah, there's a whole load of people of a certain demographic who are walking around feeling like this, and it's only a matter of time. It's sad before their health does really suffer.
What do you see in terms of the impact of chronic stress and that super busy lifestyle that folks are living right now, especially in white collar or professional service profession, really demanding the big corporate culture of running around the clock and seeking that promotion and seeking that bonus? What do you see in terms of the impact of stress on the markers of metabolic health?
Yeah, stress is kind of an interesting one. I myself have talked to many people with stress and coached many myself. And it- I'll even say when I work in the hospital, it is amazing how many people I see have this acute health crisis, and then they'll kind of go through, and then on hospital day 2 or day 3, I'll sit down with them and they'll suddenly open up on how their life has been insane and everything's been building up and they've been just like running around like a headless chicken. And at a scientific level, I mean, we're talking about two very potentially devastating hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, which do serve a function. I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, we have to have a fight or flight response, otherwise, we wouldn't survive. We have to know when there's a threat, and the adrenaline and cortisol shoot up and help us either get away from the threat or fight the threat. The problem with modern day living is that cortisol and adrenaline levels are chronically elevated for persistently long periods. And just there's no overstating this. It wreaks absolute havoc on your body, basically every organ system. I mean, for a start, we've already mentioned metabolic health, but yeah, that's one of the first things that goes. Your cells will be more inflamed, inflammatory markers will go up, and then you will get detrimental effects of that, whether it's your blood sugar, your blood pressure. But from a mental standpoint, and I would love to see more research on this over the next few years, when people are stressed, as so many are nowadays in our toxic culture, when you are running around with those levels of anxiety and feeling like there's no way out, constantly stressed, lashing out, having these sort of moments where you're not yourself, it really does build up often to a point where there's just suddenly some catastrophic event that happens. This is what I see in the hospital. And I do think, and this is why I'm really encouraged by people like yourself, the work that you're doing is trying to get people, ideally before they get to that, and understand that, look, there's a way out. You don't need to go down this path, and you have to take a step back and you have to realize what's going on in your body with these persistently elevated adrenaline and cortisol levels.
What are some of the most common and most catastrophic patient scenario you see on a day-to-day basis in the hospital?
I mean, the most common one would be a heart attack or a stroke,
Okay.
which I've seen.
Hmm.
Now, there may be different circumstances. There may be that executive who's in their 40s, 50s, and then has the heart attack, stroke. And on the surface, I mean, they might be in reasonable shape. Maybe they don't even have bad metabolic markers. I mean, most of the time they do, but sometimes they don't, in which case, it's just purely the stress which has driven this. Negative effects on the heart or the vascular system. Another not uncommon scenario, see, this one is a little bit more sad, but I could probably think of like dozens of cases over the last few years of people coming into hospital with an acute infection, which seems out of proportion to how badly it should affect them for their demographic, but they've been stressed and then their immune system goes down as well. So whether we're talking about a viral infection or even I've seen cases of really severe shingles which come on, um, including, and this is when I was saying it was sad, with bereavement. I see that when people have that acute stress, they will come down with a really bad case of shingles or another infection within a few weeks, and that is just a real educational point and learning point about how bad stress can be for the body. It completely depresses your immune system when you have that level of depression suddenly hit you.
And you've just spoken about immune system and immunity. What is the connection between our metabolic health and our immunity?
Well, I often think of them as one and the same thing. Your metabolic system and your immune system are working in tandem. So if one isn't working, the other isn't working. I mean, we saw during the pandemic, the demographics that got most badly affected by the virus after the elderly were people who were in poor shape, the obese, the type 2 diabetics, because by definition, if I can simplify this for anyone who's watching, if your metabolic system, your metabolic health isn't where it should be, we've already said you're inflamed. And if you are inflamed, your immune system is going to be depressed as well. So yes, absolutely, the two go hand in hand. If you want strong immunity, you really need to think about your metabolic health. And most of us already know this from looking around. We know that the people who are strongest physically and mentally and eat well, they tend to get fewer infections. And if they do get an infection, they bounce back really fast. Whereas the people who are really unhealthy around us, the smallest little cold will knock them out. These are all very obvious to most of us, these facts.
Now, considering the huge amount of patients you see day to day, considering your decades of experience and expertise, knowing all that you know, seeing all that you see, and hearing all that you hear, if you could be on a secret mission to go into your patient's house preventively and change a few things, remove some things from their lifestyle, what would you take away from them to be well? Let's say you have a magic power and you could go into their house and remove things that they're about to use, eat, or do that is really bad for them. What would you do?
Oh, that's another good one. Yeah, I'll have to put some thought into that. Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, those people who watch me will know what I'm going to say, is absolutely minimize the ultra processed foods that you have in your house. So, for anyone who doesn't know, most of our intake now, sadly, in the US and UK, is processed foods. A few decades ago, it was close to 0%. Now it's over 70%. I've seen some statistics. So processed foods basically are what you get from the grocery store. Sadly, 80 to 90% of the grocery store. Read the ingredient labels, and often you don't recognize the things that are being put in your food, additives, preservatives, sugars, often hidden under different names. And my number one piece of advice is keep it as simple as possible. The more you can simply eat real food cooked from scratch, ultimately you can't go wrong with a meal of a protein and two vegetables. I mean, don't they say that in the UK as well? Protein and two veg, best meal that you could possibly have. But now everything is complicated by all of these processed foods. So if you want to drastically improve your health, remove these items from your house and simply don't get them from the grocery store. I mean, I don't. Take away the bags of chips, take away the candies. I know it might be difficult if you have a young family to do that. Maybe put them in a separate place where you can't get to them. So that would be the number one thing. Real food at every opportunity. Minimize other bad things that you could put into your body. Don't forget the drinks. So you don't want to drink your calories. So ideally, get rid of the sodas. If you have to have soda, diet soda is still better than sugary soda. Although ideally, you just want to be drinking water on its own. You can put lemon in it to make it taste a bit better if pure water is not your thing. Okay. What else could we say? Alcohol. Be very careful with alcohol intake. That's another downfall for many people, especially people who are very stressed, can turn to alcohol. But remember, a lot of that will get converted into sugar and high in calories as well, especially certain forms of alcohol. Then I would urge you to think about what else you're doing at home. Are you sedentary a lot of the time? Are you spending a lot of time on the couch watching TV? Get rid of cable TV. And I got rid of it a couple of years ago. One of the best things I ever did. I mean, cable TV is very negative in the US. So, not that I was ever a big TV watcher, but getting rid of that was great. And if I have to watch something, I watch it online or on Netflix. Okay, so those would be the main things for at home. And then you should strive to also tick a few other boxes. I always say walk as much as possible. If you don't have a regular gym routine, we'll come to that in a moment. Get your 10,000 steps in minimum. I know a lot of people who stay in great shape just by walking and eating well. You don't necessarily have to do more exercise, although I certainly would advise more organized activity, ideally going to the gym or doing an exercise class. Definitely get engaged in muscle strengthening. Okay. And I want you to also think very carefully about the stress in your life. As we've already said, keep thinking every day, what can you do to take your mind away from stress? Can you engage in a hobby? Can you meet up with friends? Do you have a community gathering? Okay, if you have to watch a TV show or Netflix, watch something that relaxes you, like a comedy show. Do that. Sleep enough every night as well. Again, another huge box that many people aren't ticking. Ideally, most people should be sleeping at least 6.5 to 8.5 hours every night. That's a sweet spot. And have a good winding down routine at the end of the day so that you can have a good sleep. Don't eat too late. Alcohol as well can disrupt a lot of people's sleep. So think about that too. So those would be my main pillars. So if I could go into somebody's house to answer your questions, I would get rid of the horrible ultra processed foods. Try your best to cook from scratch, or if you have to buy processed foods, minimal ingredients. Stay well hydrated, minimize the amount of time on the couch, stay active, get moving, do some muscle strengthening, think about stress, and sleep enough every night. Easier said than done. I do realize that. I know all these things are very easy to say, but I want people to remember that achieving a good level of health, if you're in poor health now, if you haven't got good metabolic health, if you're overweight, this is a journey. It's not a marathon, it's not a sprint. And every little thing you do, you would be so surprised. I've worked with so many people who just initiate small changes and say, okay, I'm going to start. I don't walk enough now. I'm going to walk 5,000 steps. Then a few weeks later, they take it up to 10,000. That, or somebody might say, look, when I go out to the grocery store, I'm going to park a little bit further away. I'm just going to walk a bit more. Okay, I'm going to not eat this snack at 2 p.m. every day. I'll cut it out. When I have bread, I'm just going to have a half portion. Just these tiny little steps. You can be a completely new person in 6 to 8 weeks. All you have to do is decide enough is enough. I want to make a change and I'm going to commit to starting this journey. So I've talked for a long time there, but I hope some of that resonated and can help some people watching.
Hugely, hugely. It's as though you were speaking about a before and after picture of my life.
Glad to hear that.
You pretty much described my life as a lawyer when I burnt out, and then you describe my life now. So,
Fantastic. And so many people out there. I mean, I've had periods in my life as well. I mean, a few years ago as well, I wasn't as into health as I am now. And when you're on the other side, like myself or yourself, you can kind of recognize this problem in so many other people. And sometimes you kind of feel like shaking them almost, saying, listen, there's a better way than what you're doing now. You have to realize that. Just take the step and you will be so much happier as well. In 8 weeks, you'll be a whole new person, sometimes even in less than 8 weeks. I've had people lose several pounds in 4 weeks just because they have committed to a journey and taken small steps. They don't necessarily have to do huge things like commit to running a marathon or go to the gym for 2 hours. You don't need to do that. You just need to start small.
I really appreciate that, Doctor. And I was wondering, you just alluded to the fact that you had a bit of a personal journey too with your health. Would you be comfortable sharing more with us? When was
Oh,
your
certainly. Yeah.
pivot moment, maybe, or if you had one of those moments that rerouted you and made you change certain aspects of your lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it was after I arrived in the United States. No, no surprises there. So it was during my residency towards the end where I wasn't really in good habits. I don't think I went to the gym at all. Maybe I ran occasionally. I was eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of takeouts, and I had started to put on a bit of weight as well. Completely different. I was only in my 20s at the time. So I finished my residency training and then I decided, and that's actually when I got into this space and I started with some blogging. I wrote some books and I was also having a big eye-opening experience with being an attending doctor and realizing how much illness was caused simply by lifestyle. And since then the situation has got explosively worse. But yeah, that was my wake up call. I was in the field of health and I don't think my mental health was as good as it should have been. Obviously, residency is a stressful period as well. So all those things were colliding. And had I not taken these steps, I think things would have been very different. Now, fortunately, I reversed it very quickly. In fact, I had some people come and meet me who hadn't seen me since I'd been a medical resident, and they met me a year or two later and they said, wow, you look different. You actually look more energetic. You've lost weight, and we can see a big change. And it was all because I focused on those core pillars. Now, I was never in a position where I was like really fallen off the cliff, like obese or something, but I was at a position where if I didn't change things, I would have gone down a very different path, I'm sure, during my 30s.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I was wondering if I could ask you a question on sleep as well, because you mentioned how fundamental sleep was. And although everyone is thriving for more sleep, I have a very common question for my clients who are most often sleep deprived during the week. So we're talking like 3-4 hours, sometimes even all-nighters.
Yeah.
So just working around the clock, just think your
Yeah.
Wall Street, think London, Paris, all
Yeah.
those places really demanding, working in law, working in finance. And what they often tell me is, because I see their Aura ring or I see their data using a different kind of watch, and I can see their sleep data. And what they often tell me is they don't sleep for one night, then 3 hours, then 2 hours, 4 hours, and then on Saturday, 11 hours, even 12 hours, right?
Mm.
And do you think that's actually a good thing when you have a night where you sleep 11, 12 plus hours? Or can it be a sign that actually there is something going on?
Yeah, well, definitely it's a sign that you're completely exhausted. I'm glad that at least they do get 12 hours sleep every few days, because I know some people in law, finance, even in medicine will go weeks only having 4 or 5 hours sleep. And this has been studied. Generally, the study I looked at was a huge study done in Italy. Generally, for most people, the sweet spot is between 6.5 to 9 hours. I mean, everybody's different who sleeps 9 hours anyway, but I'd say for most people, yeah, 6.5 to 8 hours should be the ideal sleep. And the best position you want to be in is going to sleep at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every morning. Then your body gets into a circadian rhythm and you're best placed to be in the best possible metabolic health. Having said that, I know it's easier said than done. I know people have very stressful, demanding jobs, and some people might have young families, and it's simply not realistic to do that every single night. I'd say the first step is to recognize if sleep is a big problem for you. If you're in that pattern that you alluded to, sleeping for 3 hours a night and then making up at the weekend, that eventually is going to catch up with you. If it's impossible for you to get consistent sleep every night, at least try to do it every other night. I've had some times in my life briefly where I've had to do this because I've been busy with whatever, but even I will admit this isn't the best thing to do. So if you sleep 4 or 5 hours one night, you have to sleep the 8 the next. You can't do two bad sleeps in a row. So that would be my first piece of advice. Just don't wait a few days. Okay, one night, meeting a deadline, whatever, fine. But then the next night, you have to make it up. It actually gets to a good general point for health. I also have another rule called the never do two bad things in a row rule. So what that means is you have to commit to, if you've had a cheat meal or a cheat day, your next one can't be the same. You have to have a good one next. And the great thing about this philosophy is that it quickly gets you back on track. So if I don't go to the gym one day, I will say, I have to go the next day. I cannot go 2 days without doing it. You would be surprised if you adopt that philosophy, how quickly all of the good things will add up. And then you'll eventually want to do the right thing all the time. But really important. And I thought of it then when we talked about the sleep issue, to not do it twice in a row. So whatever you can do, if you're in this situation where you're not sleeping enough, it's not healthy for you. It's going to catch up with you. Better to deal with it now.
So, for example, if you had a really big night out Friday night over drinking, you're not going
Yeah.
to do another one on Saturday, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be totally crazy. Maybe Yeah, maybe anyone in college could do that. I don't think after a certain age people have the stamina to do that, but yeah, that's true. 2 nights in a row, tough.
Okay, but it's a good rule as well for folks that tend to rely on drinking after a rough day, which is very common,
Mm,
right? So
it
if you
is common.
drank heavily on a Monday night to cope with Monday, you may not want to drink again heavily on Tuesday to cope with Tuesday. How does that sound?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, drinking might be another. You never really want to binge drink. I would urge anybody to really cut back on alcohol if that's what's getting you through. However, a good starting point is, yeah, okay, if you're in a situation where you're doing it every day or almost every day, at least don't do it 2 days in a row. You
Mm.
can start with that.
Do you think there is a safe dose when it comes to alcohol? Because let's face it, in the corporate world, it
Yeah.
almost comes
Yes.
with the job. You know, a lot of my clients, when we're doing coaching and they want to look at their lifestyle holistically, that's one bit they really struggle with, because if they're networking, they're doing business development, they're the managing partner, the head of the hedge fund, that
Yeah.
it comes with the job. There is an element of entertainment, of taking out the client, the investors, wining and dining, etc. How do you work with that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to meet people where they are. I'm not saying you have to be a teetotaler. I mean, I'm not a teetotaler. I'm not a big drinker either. And I've found with each passing year, I enjoy drinking less and less personally. Um, so I would say that if there's any way that anybody could try to make sure who's in that sort of field that firstly, we've already mentioned you don't do it 2 days in a row. And then limit it. So when you're out, especially if you're working the next day, I certainly wouldn't advise more than 2 or 3 drinks. Um, some people, especially in certain arenas, and to be fair, doctors aren't the best example here either. They are known for drinking. So uh, some people will drink several drinks, which I think is just too much at once, unless it's like a very rare special occasion. Keep thinking about how you could possibly cut back. Could you do you have to have like an alcoholic beverage? Could you have a mocktail instead and let your whoever you're entertaining drink? I mean, that's one possibility. You don't have to drink with them, and also think carefully about what you're drinking. I mean, all drinks are not created equal. So wine is probably better than drinking beer, for example. Spirits, again, probably better than beer and the calorie load that you're getting with that. And in terms of what is a safe amount, so officially in the US anyway, it's not recommended that you have anything more than an average of 2 drinks every day, I think, if you're a male, and 1 drink for a female every day. I think that's too much. That would be the upper limit if someone was drinking 2 alcoholic beverages every day. But you don't necessarily have to be zero. So I'll tell you an interesting story. From being a doctor, I meet a lot of people who are in their 90s, and I'll often ask them, especially the ones who look really well, I will say, look, what's your secret? How are you so good? And I cannot tell you how many of them will say, I have a cocktail every day. And the Queen who passed away a couple of years ago, sadly, she was well known for that. She would drink alcohol every day. So it's not like people who drink regularly one a day do necessarily any badly. And we know from countries in the world like France and Italy that consume alcohol, they have better biomarkers. So clearly it's not like a poison that you can't do. My issue with it is that a lot of people overdrink. And that's the thing, knowing what your sweet spot is. So I would say, quite simply, for a male, I would restrict it to under 10 drinks a week, and for a female, under 5 to 6 in a whole week. That would probably be a, a healthy amount, if we could put it that way. So if you want to drink a glass of wine a night, if your other metabolic markers are fine, it may not necessarily be a bad thing. I wouldn't do it every day, but I can't say it's going to absolutely be your downfall if you do that in moderation.
Thank you. May I ask you two last questions?
Sure.
First one is, I'm seeing a rise of vaping. I see it with teens, I see it with adults. I see it with my clients. I see it everywhere. Now, when we go on the street, there's so much vaping going around. What's your take on it? And are you seeing that trend as well?
I actually believe this is more of a trend in the UK and Europe than it is in the US, although it is an issue here as well. Obviously, I'm not a fan of it. It does come with its own health risks. It's probably, well, I don't think it's as bad as cigarette smoking. I'm I'm not an advocate of it. I would definitely advise anyone who vapes to try to cut back on that as well.
Last question. What is your take on endurance training? So, a lot of my clients tend to be recurring marathon trainers and runners. I'm one of them. And I sometimes hear from members of the medical profession, don't overtrain, careful with your knees and this type of thing. So on the one hand, you get a pat on the shoulder for working out so much and doing your marathon. And on the other side of the equation, you hear certain medical professionals tell you, "Ooh, be careful, you don't want to overdo it." So where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, running a marathon, I mean, when we live in a society where so many people don't move and there's such bad health, I mean, I could never seriously say that running a marathon is a bad thing. But I understand what you're getting at. There is some evidence that people who go to that extent, if you're doing frequent marathons all the time, there can be negative health consequences, and your body could fall off a cliff for a very different reason to somebody who's, say, obese. So I have run half marathons before. I've never run a full marathon. Interesting, I was having this conversation at work a couple of weeks ago. Someone who
Interesting.
suddenly, actually, she was, I think, in her 60s, and she had decided to run a marathon and was training for it. So I thought, good for her.
Wow.
And yeah, she was telling me about her training regimen. Somebody who works in the same hospital. So, I mean, it's fantastic if you're able to do that. I would just advise simple caution if you are somebody who is really pushing yourself. When you're 18 years old, it's one thing, but if you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, it might not be the best thing for you. And as with anything, moderation is key. I would certainly prefer that people above a certain age, let's just say 50, we're doing half marathons. You don't look like you're there yet, but if people are really that age, they you want to be mindful and make sure you're getting checked by your doctor. Make sure that your heart is okay. Get your blood pressure. Get your EKG checked. Maybe have an echocardiogram, a heart ultrasound, to make sure that there's no reason why your heart is going to not be able to cope.
I love that you said that. And actually, before my first marathon training, I did it. I did a heart cardiogram because of my history with my father. So I did that. And I
Oh, that's
also did
smart.
my VO2 max and I did all the different measures for my heart, etc.
Sure.
And I'm pleased to report that I got the go ahead and the green flag from my cardiologist. So
Oh,
I'm on my
good.
second marathon now and I have one on Sunday.
Oh, fantastic. Good luck. Best of luck.
Appreciate that. I'll be thinking about all
Oh,
your
wait,
good
is that the
advice.
London Marathon?
It's the Brighton one.
It's the Brighton one. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. So I'll be honest, doctor. I have the pre-race nerves at the moment. It's just 72 hours away. So I get this little butterflies in my
Adrenaline. Yeah.
stomach. Yeah,
Well, good for you. Good for you. I'm sure you'll do great.
I appreciate that. Doctor, where can folks learn more about you if they want to get into your world and get more of your wisdom and knowledge?
Okay, well, I have a variety of social media channels. YouTube is my main platform, but I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on Twitter. You can put my name in and find me there. My website is drsuneeldhand.com. You can learn all about my work, everything that I do. I have some downloads on there for anyone who's interested in improving their metabolic health. I also have a program, a mini program for anyone who wants to naturally reverse any of the conditions that we've been talking about. All of those details on my website.
Thank you. Doctor, have I left anything out? And was there anything you wanted to say that I didn't give you a chance to say?
No, I think we covered a lot, and I would finish with what I touched upon during this talk, that it's on everybody to realize that nobody is coming to save you. When it comes to your health, you have to decide to take charge, and we have this one body. It's a true gift, and we owe it to ourselves. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your family, because I've never met anybody who tells me their family is not important to them. If your family is important to you, then you want to be around for as long as possible. Be a shining example of health to everybody around you. And it starts with all those fundamentals that we talked about. Eat real food, resist all of the toxic rubbish which is all around us, move as much as possible, strength train, focus on stress in your life, sleep enough. Don't become a statistic, because a medical industrial complex is waiting to suck you in. And once you're in, it's very difficult to get out. So that would be my final closing point.
Thank you, Doctor. I really appreciate you, and I can't wait to share your wisdom everywhere I can. Thank you.
Pleasure. Great discussion. Thanks for having me.